Hey, thanks for coming to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. Welcome back. We're going to have a good episode today here. We've got a good friend of ours who's been on the show once before, and he's back for more punishment and abuse. Jason Conley of Envista Forensic. This is the guy that can tell you what's going on with your cell phone, all the little things you have no idea are in that little device. Well, get ready. He's going to talk to us about some new stuff and what's happening and what he's seeing going on. So let's get into her with my co-host, Chris Harris. Yay, Chris! Hey, Jason, how you doing?
I'm great, guys. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me back.
Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself and about forensics.
Sure thing, you bet. I'd be happy to. So, as John mentioned, I'm working with Envista Forensics. I've been a digital forensic examiner for almost 20 years. In the beginning, it was just computers because that was what was front and center. But it evolved, very much. And as you can imagine, today, there's a whole bunch of subcategories of forensics: computer forensics, mobile forensics, a whole bunch of different areas, even cell site location analysis, where we grab data. We grab data from call detail records, the stuff that Big Brother keeps to make sure Big Brother knows where all of us are every millisecond of the day. And we can actually take the data from those records, and we could go drive out and drive around the cell towers and validate whether certain details are true or not, because they're usually presented in a court of law, sometimes by law enforcement, big cases. The last case we were involved in Canada was actually the Oland murder trial. Remember that big one out on the East Coast?
Yeah. Which trial? Sorry?
The Oland murder trial. Remember when the senior fellow there was murdered and his son was accused of murdering his dad? Big billionaire family out there. Yep. That was a real big deal. It in fact, there was a documentary made about it on CBC. Yeah, it was part of the CBC Gem series called the Oland Murder Trial. Yeah. Anyway, we were involved in the second trial, and he actually got acquitted. And the cell phone played a pretty important piece of evidence in that case.
Oh, interesting.
So this stuff, most people have no idea just how much tracking is going on and how much data is available in those little friendly devices that we carry around in our pockets. So
something for some reason we can't seem to do without anymore.
Correct. In fact, us Canadians, we are the most connected people around the world. We have on average something ridiculous like 2.2 cell phones per person, something like that.
Wow.
We actually have better internet speeds than most of our colleagues around the world. So
I really find that hard to believe that we have 2.2 cell phones because of the exorbitant cost of one and the data rates, but we won't go there. That's not bashing the telcos gets me nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, gosh.
Let's get into trucking and your role in trucking forensics. What should a driver do after calling emergency personnel and his employer after a significant event?
Awesome question. Yes. So this is an area of opportunity, very much so in the realm of the trucking industry, because very few times do we get a call that is ripe and immediate, which is the ideal scenario. So essentially, once the emergency has been dealt with, once any injured parties, that sort of thing, once that 911 call per se has happened, and the scene is settled in that regard, one of the very first things that should happen is that any sources of evidence are preserved, right? It's a given that in the trucking industry, due to the value and possibly the high impact of that accident, all sources of evidence are going to be really important. Obviously, if the police are showing up, you see the first thing that they do, they want to line up the witnesses, right? They want to get all the witnesses interviewed. They want to keep them separate. They want, that's one of their highest priorities after personal safety is getting interviews done as quickly as possible before anybody takes off. And what's the reason for that? Well, people take off. If you have to hunt them down later, well, things can change. Their story can change. Their memory can change. All kinds of variables come into the picture. Well, it's just the same with digital evidence. Our phones are changing every second. Right? Literally every second that they're on, the data is changing. It's a moving target. And so every hour that passes, every day that passes, etc., the more change happens on our phone, and potentially there's a risk that important evidence will disappear. Now, of course, there's two sides to that coin. If the driver believes they are in the right, that they were driving safely, that they were using their phone safely, if at all, that should be, and this is really who we're addressing here today. It's very, very important that these folks understand that this volatile evidence will be their best friend in protecting them, because what's the number one accusation today? Distracted driving.
Yeah, distracted driving. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, of course, the driver was texting at that time.
Absolutely. And and we've seen some wild ones,
I can imagine.
Well, I'm thinking, Jason, with your forensics, you can prove or disprove the truth to the statement, right?
That's it. That's exactly correct. So if the truth is on your side, I'm your best friend. Right. If the truth is not on your side, and if I'm hired by the other side, I'm your worst nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, Jason, what's the benefit of, when we were talking earlier, you had said that you now carry a burner phone with you. So can you explain why a driver might want a burner phone and the advantages of having that? Why do you carry a burner phone? And explain exactly, first of all, perhaps, what is a burner phone?
Burner phone, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so the term burner phone actually has a bit of a sinister connotation to it, because that initially, I think that term was allocated by law enforcement in reference to what drug dealers carry, because it's a phone that they would easily dispense with and move on to another one. So let's leave that connotation definitely aside. We could call it a spare phone if you like. But yeah, I am one of those strange people that ends up with three phones in their possession: the personal, the business, and what I inappropriately call my burner phone. But no, I always keep a spare phone on hand that's fully connected. It's a new phone. It's got all the apps, everything, so that if a trucking driver is in trouble, one of you good folks can call me. I'll meet up with them immediately and be able to put this in their hand, only because most drivers only have one phone. And this gives them the comfort of knowing, okay, I can continue with my life. I can continue with my day, because my forensic buddy, Jason, has my phone. He's going to need it for a few hours, maybe a day at most. But this offers the convenience of allowing them to carry on. That's really what this is all about. And it's, it is vital that, that I get that phone from them as soon as possible. It's absolutely as soon as possible. I've had cases where I've driven out and met with a driver the very same day to make that swap. Now, I will back up a little bit and say the best case scenario, honestly, and if there happens to be, some insurance coverage in the picture, and undoubtedly the employer is already lining up counsel, right? The best case scenario is we buy them a new phone, and I'll tell you why. I mean, one, they just went through a traumatic incident, and the significance of buying them a new phone, and ideally, we go and find a good match. If they had a Samsung 9, let's go get them a Samsung 9 or something comparable. They have an iPhone 13, let's go out and get whatever the latest one is. But what I can do quite easily is just simply create an iCloud backup, or in the Google, with Google, we've got the cloud for that as well. I could just simply back up everything off their old phone and upload it to the new phone, and boom, they're walking away with the exact same phone, probably a slightly newer one. That is the best case scenario, and I'll tell you why. I'll try not to get too technical on this, but when it comes to computer forensics, it's very, very easy for us forensic examiners to come and clone a hard drive from a computer. So we can make an exact copy, bit for bit, with the tools we have very easily, and we're able to later stand up in a court of law and attest and prove very easily that those two hard drives, the copy and the original, are identical. It's not like that in the world of mobile forensics. Our phones have a series of chips that all this data is being stored on. And the forensic tools that we have to copy the phone, they're actually doing an extraction of what they can access. So it's not a spitting image. We're just grabbing really what the forensic software engineers were capable of writing into their code at that moment in time.
Right.
But look at Android. I mean, there's something ridiculous like 2 million applications and growing. Right. I mean, it's just it's insane. So the engineers can't write programs for all those applications, and there are some that are really secure.
Yeah. So that's where it's important to make sure that you have the original phone then to work from.
It is the absolute best case, John, because if let's say, if I was only able to extract 70% of the applications, and, maybe the driver, heard about it, a messaging app, or their son or daughter pushed them into it and then they got to like it, and that wasn't included in the extraction. Well, if that becomes an issue in court months down the road, if we have the original phone, we can always go back to it. And if the software hasn't caught up at that time, we could do the old-fashioned manual exam, which means I could turn on a video camera and I can do some thumb forensics, and we can go through and we can pull out the good stuff, but maintain the principles of forensic practice at the same time, so we're not destroying anything.
Okay.
So that's
this is some pretty high tech investigation. So answer me this then: should I be worried if I'm involved in an incident or something like that? And if so, what should I do differently, or what should I have done differently to begin with?
If you're the bad guy or the good guy?
Well, say I'm the driver. Say I'm the driver. And I'm involved in an incident or whatever.
How about you answer it both ways?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. What would it be? Yeah. If I was doing something improper, or even if I wasn't doing something improper,
not that we want drivers.
Both ways? Yeah.
Listen, I don't want drivers erasing evidence. Yeah. I mean, if they're guilty. Just a quick story, Jason. I've got an in-cab dash cam, a driver-facing dash cam, operating in my vehicle. And it's not because I'm the world's best driver. It's because I truly believe at the time of the crash, I will have nothing to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If something happens.
Yep.
Yes.
However, go ahead. Answer this question about worrisome stuff.
Well, I play the role of a third party, unbiased expert. So I do criminal defense work as much as I do, civil. I'm on both sides all the time. So the truth will set you free. And again, even in the case of, a situation where maybe someone does have some guilt, you know what? Maybe the degree of guilt might be, extended beyond what it actually was. So there could even be merits to having, as many data sources as possible to help you own up to what's true and not have it exaggerated and carried into a greater length. Because honestly, for the sides of both parties, that phone is going to be one of the best sources of data in the investigation. And trust me, anytime there's an accident, the first thing anyone's going to want is that phone. Now, don't get me wrong, there's other sources, right? You're going to have your black boxes, your GPS, depending on, what you're equipped with. As you just mentioned, Chris, if you happen to have a dash cam, right? These are all extremely valuable sources, and we shouldn't underestimate the dash cam either. That could be something you need to pull off and stop recording immediately, because most people have it set to overwrite, right? Probably a couple days worth of driving, maybe, and that sucker's going to write right over itself. And if we're going to enter that video evidence into the equation, that also has to be handled with digital best practices. So in fact, someone such as myself, I could clone the memory from that from the dash cam at the same time as doing the phone. So if that's available, that would absolutely be, recommended. And in this, and that just helps keeps the picture perfect. If the driver went from accident, to boss to me, or accident and straight to myself because, things worked out that well, there's no room for anyone to say, oh, that was edited. They took that home and they met with their brother-in-law who's a graphics whiz and did this, that. No. All the evidence went straight to my hand. They had no opportunity to muddle with anything. I did an extraction. I created an image of the memory from the dash cam. It's all solid, right? The chain of custody is there, and it speaks to the value of that evidence. So that's the absolute best case. And let me say, if a driver was in the wrong and they and don't think this hasn't happened. They decide, they're sweating about that accident overnight, and the next day they decide their phone will meet with a tragic accident. That's happened. And that hasn't always helped them. Okay, because of course, everybody's eyebrow raises. When something like this happens, which isn't always good. But the other thing is, people aren't aware of just how much is being stored off their phone in other places, right, that are retrievable. So those big giant cell towers they pass every half a kilometer on the highway, those suckers are recording every millisecond they can. They're gathering all kinds of data. There's a lot of our applications are storing the data on the cloud, right? And then of course you've got your other sources. So that's, you're not always in the clear when that iPhone happens to get run over by an 18-wheeler's truck several times. That's for sure. So personally, I think if I was in the wrong, I'd want to fess up to it quick, but at least be able to say, I did this and this, but I didn't do all that, right? Yeah. Maybe there's some blame to share, who knows? But I always believe the truth will set you free, and that's what I'm good at helping with. So,
wow. Just a couple of comments on that. For the drivers, never admit fault. Yes. However, I don't even know how to describe Joe Fried or Joe Fried. Johnny.
Yep.
He's an attorney that specializes in truck crashes, Jason.
Right.
And he also says that I've never seen a nuclear verdict where the company comes in hat in hand and says, we're sorry, we messed up. How much do we owe? It's always when they are fighting a losing battle, and Joe's good at his job. He makes them lose sometimes when they want to fight. So
Understood.
what I hear you saying is, don't go out there destroying evidence, because a lot of it's going to be recovered anyways.
Yes. Come back to bite you in the hiney.
Yes.
With people like Jason.
Yeah.
Yes.
Last thing you want is somebody coming back bite you in the shamrock. That won't go over well.
Yes.
So,
where do you get this stuff, Mr. Farquhar?
It's just a figment of my imagination, I guess. So yeah.
Okay.
Isn't there shamrock on your cell phone? I know I got one on mine.
Go ahead. I'll throw it back to Jason.
I was going to ask you, what kind of mistakes are you seeing drivers make? What is there something they could do, not do? What would be better to protect themselves as well as what's on that device, other than dropping it in the toilet or the bathwater?
Certainly, sure. So I mean, I've the hands-free, right? The hands-free technology is there. There's no excuse for a driver to have the phone in their hand, right? Unless they're parked with their truck off. Yes, sir.
When you're doing your forensics, can you tell if the driver is hands-free, like connected to a Bluetooth device?
Yes, I can. Okay. So and if a driver's on a hands-free, and that's the way they roll, and I've had cases where drivers have been mid-conversation in an accident, and it was absolutely irrelevant to the judge. They had no concern about that whatsoever because they had their hands-free on. And all the other variables as well, the good driving record, they say honest, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of variables that could play in. A recent one, driver, this woman was quite short, and she always kept her cell phone in the cab up way beyond her reach on the passenger side, and she used her hands-free. Well, all that checked out, and she was, she couldn't even stand up and reach this thing. She'd have to, and that was very advantageous, I think, in the big picture. And situations like that, I recommended to her. I said, listen, when you get your phone back, it wouldn't hurt to just run into your cab and take a snapshot like that. Or if you happen to have any selfies or anything else from the past, which would be even better, showing that that's where you keep your phone. That's, all that would be, I think, useful in putting this picture together. If someone goes to the bother of, setting themselves up hands-free, might as well, maximize that, scenario to help protect yourself. But I wouldn't want drivers to freak out because they were on a hands-free, call or what have you, or message when they got into an accident. That's not the end of the world for sure, not by a long shot. Based on what I've heard from my colleagues in my company that have done tons of these in the United States, and even from what I've seen, what it really comes down to is the moment of the accident, right?
Here's another scenario, Jason, and you know what? I'm a driver right now, and there's no way you can tell because I wasn't holding the phone. I had it mounted on my dash, and I was watching a YouTube video, or I was watching the hockey game, streaming it while I was going down the road. So I'm not even talking on the phone. So I don't even know how you think you could tell that I was distracted by any means because I'm busy watching out the window. But I glance over every now and then, catch what the scores are, and see how how they're doing there. So there's no way, right?
So we're basically, going to be able to recover all the activity of what's going on there. So, you could rest assured that your perusal of the game will be present in the evidence during an examination. Yeah, that will be recovered. Now, what's a judge and some lawyers going to make of that? Was he just listening to the game, or was he watching the game? did that happen to coincide with 2 seconds before the slap shot that won the Cup?
Yeah. Well, especially if the Leafs are playing, and it'll be a Stanley Cup championship for sure. There's no doubt about that.
Sure.
So,
well, we know there can't be a crash when the Leafs are playing for the Stanley Cup, right? And I'm a Leaf fan, like. But
so yeah, it'll all come back. It'll all come back. But yeah, it's the Bluetooth headset thing is a big deal. I certainly wouldn't rely on the old analog plug in your earphones, because one, that guarantees you're within pretty close proximity of that phone, which lends itself to touching and swiping, etc. But yeah, the hands-free, and I mean, with a lot of even truck cabs today, look at the infotainment system. And that didn't even make my list earlier of all the sources, right? Again, that phone may meet with disaster, but that infotainment system that it's plugged into copies off a whole lot of that stuff. Calls, messages, all kinds of content, GPS points, all kinds of good stuff in the infotainment, and we do pull that stuff at Envista too. So, there's just so much stuff. But the great thing is, I mean, with high tech cabs, even my car when I'm driving around, the infotainment system allows me to safely interact with my phone. Right, I can turn a little dial while I'm driving, and I can change some options. I could put on an audio podcast or what have you, or
like Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast. Is that what you listen to? Is that what you're saying?
24/7. That's it.
Oh, good deal. Good.
My God, you don't have a life, do you?
Yeah. Let's check his phone. Let's check his phone for evidence of that, Chris. We need to make sure that he's.
Hey, that's right. We know. We
know some people.
Jason, we're getting close to wrapping this up. But I got to ask you before you give up your time, what should employers or carriers or maybe even another lawyer do immediately following a collision?
Yeah. So for this, I don't mean to kill it with redundancy, but where a driver may not remember this, or they may be too shook up to think about it, they should be the ones as the safety fallback to want to get that digital evidence into the hands of a forensic examiner who is trained in mobile forensics, for sure. And again, for all the same reasons. And typically, honestly, those are usually the people who reach out to me. It's quite often a safety manager with a carrier, or or their counsel. But that being said, I would really love, this is why I wanted to come on again, I'd really love for your drivers to know about this themselves, so they can look out for their own best interests.
Right.
To protect them. Why? Because, why trust your fate and your future in the hands of anybody else, even if they're on your side? I've had a case. I've had a case where I've had a law firm that's representing, a driver as a defendant, and they, of course, they have the best interests of the driver and company and their client at heart, but it literally took them 4 months to get that phone into my hand, and the driver was walking around with that phone every single day, and they're certain they're in the clear. They're like, they're you know what I mean? So they're so sure they're in the clear, and it just breaks my heart. I'm just, how hard can you yell at a set of lawyers that are your client, right? You can't. But I badgered them, just saying, listen, guys, this is volatile evidence. Anything could happen. The guy could lose his phone. Could get stolen. It could, lightning could strike. It only takes a few hours for me to do this. Please, let's work this out. Someone's on vacation. And all this stuff happens, and it's like,
and in this case, this is defense material for them.
Exactly.
This is going to end up saying. What are you seeing? I'm just curious. In over the last couple of years here, what are you seeing more of? Are you seeing more of these forensics investigations going on from a defendable standpoint, or are you seeing it more from the prosecutor standpoint?
So it definitely happens from both directions, and that's pretty much textbook now. It's textbook that it's going to happen in both directions. We just happen to get called most frequently from the defense point of view. I think that maybe that has a lot to do with how we work closely with insurance carriers and law firms that are typically doing a lot of defense work. Personally, I am unbiased and I'm going to write it as I see it. I have a real passion and a real admiration for our truck drivers. There's a lot, there's a lot that's happened that's given me a lot of respect for drivers in the industry. And I will absolutely go out of my way to help them express the truth as they possess it. So, they call me up. I will meet them in the middle of the night on a weekend in a shady parking lot to make that phone swap if I have to.
And your contact info is in the show notes down below. So we're gonna do that. So if I could summarize it with a tip to the truck drivers, because that's really what you wanted to say, was as soon as possible, turn off your phone, buy a burner phone, so that way you're capturing the evidence, because I honestly believe that well over 90%, and I hope it's much higher, the driver's not at fault. Our truck driver is not at fault. They weren't on the phone, and now it's your role to prove that, hey, the accident happened, but at least we can take the cell phone out of the equation. Yes. So the sooner the driver turns the phone off, the better for your work. And then to go out and buy, I'm an iPhone guy, so to go out and buy a used iPhone, it may not have all the bells and whistles, but I heard you say you can do this in a few hours. So even if I have to get you the phone, if I'm without my phone, without all the bells and whistles for a couple of days or a week, in the big scheme of things, what the heck are we doing? And I can pick up a burner phone for a few $100, an old iPhone, and still have kind of my life together.
Absolutely. No, for sure, Chris. It's a great summary, but I wouldn't even, personally, I wouldn't even burden them with that. I mean, if they can call me, I'll start making arrangements. I might even have a line on the phone I can pick up for them, but I will definitely have a loaner. I'll definitely have a loaner that they can take out of my hand and start using immediately. I
was just gonna say the inconvenience of that loaner phone is just pittance compared to what it could be if we don't get the proper evidence in place, and then you lose that information. Like the one you're talking about, the guy with 4 months without gathering the information. Something happens to the device, that court case could just fall apart because that might be the evidence they're looking for.
Absolutely, and the other side will smell weakness. You know what I mean? And listen, Chris, I believe your guesstimate. 90% of the time, the drivers are in the right and are in the safe zone. It's just a matter of how well we can express that, right? How well the lawyer ultimately can demonstrate that. I mean, down in the U.S., if there's even a truck within visual sight of an accident, it's a target. And I literally have had cases where trucks weren't even a part of the accident, and they had the phone sent just for that very reason, because they're so litigation happy.
It's crazy how the trucking companies get called into it. So, for the driver, if we can eliminate one little question mark, because that's what the prosecuting attorney wants, is to raise doubt. So if we can get you the phone and you can absolutely prove, then at least that's one piece that we can throw out and say, there's no doubt he was not on his phone, or the driver was not on their phone.
Right.
Exactly. You got it.
Jason, I got to thank you so much for coming on the show again.
My pleasure, guys. My pleasure. Absolutely.
knowledge bombs and drivers, please.
Yeah.
If the situation arises, reach out to Jason. You should record his number somewhere so that you can have it, because my God, I almost swore. You know what happens out there. The excrement from the cow falls and it hits us.
Oh, yeah.
So, record Jason's phone number. Get your safety manager, perhaps.
Yeah.
If you are a driver and you heard this, make sure your safety manager has the opportunity. Share this podcast with other people that might benefit from this, because I think this is huge, that you can protect yourself, take steps.
Absolutely. Money well spent.
And thanks to Jason Conley to come on the show and explain it again. And Jason, of course, is from Envista Forensics, a digital specialist in forensics. But you've really come down to cell phones, haven't you?
You bet.
Sorry, Johnny, what was that?
Right here in Ontario, too. That's where he's located, right here in Ontario, Canada. So cool.
A good Canadian, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know you'll excuse us. John, Jason, and I were just having a good time. It was a great interview. And I, again, want to thank Jason Conley from Envista Forensics for taking the time to come on the Trucking, Risk, and Insurance podcast. Share this podcast if you find it useful and helpful for you. And we appreciate you all so very much. Have a great week. See you next week. John Farquhar and Chris Harris, we're out of here.